The car's tires hummed steadily along the highway, the setting sun casting long shadows across the landscape. In the front seat, Jason tapped impatiently on the steering wheel, his eyes flicking between the endless asphalt and the map on his phone. He gave it a hard stare, willing the signal to return, but the blank screen only mocked him. "Anything?" came Sarah's voice from the passenger seat. She leaned forward, peering out the window at the desolate stretch of road ahead. "Nothing." Jason gritted his teeth. "No signal, no GPS. We should have hit the highway by now." From the back seat, Trevor let out an exaggerated sigh. "Maybe we took a wrong turn back there." "What was that place?" "Hollow Creek. I told you we should have just stuck to the main route." "You also told us this was supposed to be a shortcut," Sarah shot back, glaring at Jason. "It is a shortcut." "Or was," Jason muttered, his frustration mounting. "Okay, but I don't remember any signs for this road," Lily chimed in quietly from beside Trevor. She had been staring out of the window in silence, watching as the countryside became more barren and unfamiliar. "It wasn't on the map either." Jason frowned, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "It has to lead somewhere. Roads don't just appear out of nowhere." But the longer they drove, the more unsettling the landscape became. What had once been open fields and sporadic patches of forest were now replaced by dry, cracked earth. Trees with blackened branches jutted out of the ground like skeletal hands. The further they went, the more the air seemed to thicken with an oppressive, silent tension. "Maybe we should turn back," Lily whispered, her fingers tightening around the strap of her seatbelt. Her voice trembled slightly, as though she already knew what the others wouldn't admit: they were lost. "We can't just turn back," Jason snapped. "Look, there's got to be something up ahead. A town, a gas station, something." But as the minutes stretched into hours, the road remained empty, as if the world outside had abandoned them. The sky had darkened, the last rays of the sun dipping beneath the horizon, leaving only a murky twilight. The headlights of the car stretched out weakly before them, swallowed by the void of the road. Sarah glanced at the dashboard. "We're running low on gas." "Shit," Jason hissed under his breath. He pressed down on the gas pedal harder, speeding up. The tires crunched on the loose gravel that had replaced the smooth pavement. "That's not going to help," Trevor muttered. "We should have turned around hours ago." Jason ignored him, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the steering wheel. His heart pounded in his chest, every instinct telling him they had to get off this road. But no matter how fast they went, the landscape never changed. And then, without warning, the headlights illuminated a figure standing in the middle of the road. "Jason, watch out!" Sarah screamed. He slammed on the brakes. The car screeched to a halt, tires skidding across the gravel. They stopped inches from the figure, who hadn't moved an inch. Everyone's breath hitched, and for a moment, the only sound was the wind outside, a faint whistling through the cracks of the windows. The figure was dressed in tattered clothes, their face obscured by the dim light. They didn't speak or acknowledge the car, just stood there, unnaturally still, like a shadow cast by the night itself. "What the hell is that?" Trevor whispered, his voice barely audible. Jason's hand hovered over the gearshift. "Do we drive around them?" "No way," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "We can't just." Before she could finish, the figure took a single step forward. The movement was slow, deliberate. Jason's heart leaped into his throat. "Drive, Jason," Lily said, her voice eerily calm. "We need to go. Now." Jason didn't need to be told twice. He slammed the car into reverse, the tires spinning as they shot backward down the road. The figure remained still, their eyes, or what seemed like eyes, locked on the car as it sped away. Even as they put distance between them, the figure didn't move, watching them until they disappeared into the darkness. For a moment, the car was filled with stunned silence. No one could find the words to explain what they had just seen. Jason's breath came in short, shallow bursts, his mind racing. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "Yeah," Jason replied, his voice hollow. "I saw it." "We have to get off this road," Lily said softly, her eyes wide with fear. "Before it's too late." But the road stretched on, long and unbroken, into the abyss of night. Jason's hands were slick with sweat, his heart pounding against his ribs as the car sped backward down the road. His mind raced, struggling to make sense of what had just happened. The figure, its stillness, the way it seemed to watch them, felt wrong in a way that defied explanation. It wasn't just a person standing there. It was something else. The car jolted as the rear tires hit a rough patch of gravel, jerking everyone forward. Jason cursed under his breath, forcing the car to a stop before shifting back into drive. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The figure was gone. "I don't get it," Trevor muttered, breaking the heavy silence. "What the hell was that thing? Was it even human?" "I don't care what it was," Sarah snapped. Her voice trembled with fear, but there was anger there, too. "We should have turned around when Lily said. Now I don't even know where we are." Jason took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. He had to focus. He couldn't let the fear overwhelm him. "We'll figure this out," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "There has to be an end to this road. Jason, listen to yourself." Sarah was shaking her head, eyes wide with panic. "We've been driving for hours, and we haven't seen a single sign, or another car, or—" "Enough." Jason's voice cracked with frustration. "Just, let me think." Lily shifted uncomfortably in the back seat, staring out into the endless blackness of the road. She hadn't said much since they first encountered the figure, but now her voice was barely a whisper. "There's something wrong with this place." Trevor turned to her. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," she said, hugging her knees to her chest. "It just feels wrong. Like we're not supposed to be here." Jason swallowed, forcing his eyes back on the road. He wanted to dismiss her words as nerves, but deep down, he knew she was right. Everything about this place felt off, like the air was heavier, the darkness thicker, as if the road itself was swallowing them up. "Jason," Sarah said quietly, breaking the silence, "the gas." Jason glanced down at the dashboard. The fuel gauge had dropped dangerously close to empty. His stomach twisted in knots. They couldn't afford to stop, but at this rate, they wouldn't make it much farther. "We have to keep moving," he said, trying to keep the panic from seeping into his voice. "There has to be something up ahead. A gas station or something." As they drove on, the road seemed to stretch forever, disappearing into the void of night. The car's headlights cast long, eerie shadows across the barren landscape, but there was no sign of life. No trees, no animals, no buildings. Just endless black. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Time had lost its meaning somewhere on this road. Then, out of nowhere, the headlights illuminated a sign. It was old and weathered, the letters barely legible under the thin layer of dust that coated it. Jason squinted as he slowed the car down. "Welcome to nowhere." Beneath the sign, written in smaller, faded letters, was a chilling message. "There's no way out." Jason's blood ran cold. The words seemed to pulse in the dim light, as though the sign itself was alive, breathing the warning at them. "What the hell?" Trevor whispered, leaning forward to get a better look. "This has to be a joke, right? Someone's idea of a sick prank?" Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. "We need to leave. Now." But as Jason pressed down on the gas pedal again, the car lurched forward, sputtering before it died. The engine choked and groaned, the fuel gauge now resting on empty. "No, no, no." Jason slammed his fist on the steering wheel. "Come on. But the car was dead. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the wind whistling through the cracks of the windows, an eerie melody that sent shivers down their spines. "What do we do now?" Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. Jason's mind raced. They couldn't just sit here and wait for whatever was out there. "We walk," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We can't be that far from something." "Are you insane?" Trevor shot back, his voice rising with panic. "You want us to walk out there? In the dark? With that thing we saw earlier?" "We don't have a choice," Jason said, trying to keep calm. "We can't stay in the car. We'll freeze if we stay out here all night." Sarah swallowed hard, her eyes darting between Jason and the road ahead. "What if there's more of them? Whatever that thing was, what if it's not alone?" Jason hesitated, his grip tightening on the door handle. His heart was racing, but he knew Sarah was right. The figure they had seen was just the beginning. But there was no other option. "Stay close together," Jason said, pushing open the door and stepping into the cold night air. The wind cut through his clothes, biting at his skin. "We stick to the road, and we keep moving." One by one, they climbed out of the car, their breath visible in the frigid air. The darkness seemed to press in around them, the silence deafening. As they started down the road, the sign loomed behind them like a final warning. "There's no way out." The wind howled in their ears, a constant low wail that never seemed to fade. It was as if the night itself was alive, whispering at them from the shadows. The four of them walked in silence, sticking close together as they moved down the road, each step feeling heavier than the last. Jason led the group, his jaw clenched in determination. He tried to stay focused, but every nerve in his body was on edge. The darkness around them seemed to pulse and shift, like something unseen was watching from just beyond the reach of their vision. Behind him, Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. "It's freezing," she muttered. "How is it this cold in September?" No one answered. The cold didn't feel natural, but no one wanted to acknowledge that out loud. Trevor, walking beside Lily, kept glancing nervously over his shoulder. He hadn't spoken much since they left the car, but the tension in his body was palpable. Lily was quiet too, her eyes scanning the horizon as if waiting for something to emerge from the dark. After what felt like hours, Jason saw it, a faint glow in the distance, just up ahead. "There," he said, pointing toward the light. "Look." The others stopped and squinted in the direction he was pointing. It was faint, but unmistakable, a soft, orange glow, like a fire or an old street lamp. "Is that a house?" Trevor asked. "I don't know," Jason replied, but the hope in his voice was hard to miss. "It's something. Let's go." They quickened their pace, the light growing closer with each step. The wind seemed to die down, the eerie silence returning as they neared the source of the glow. Their breath came in short bursts, the exhaustion from hours of walking finally starting to take its toll. As they got closer, the shape of a small building came into view. It was a dilapidated gas station, its wooden walls warped and sagging, as though the structure had been abandoned for years. A single, flickering light bulb hung from a post outside, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement of the lot. "This place looks old," Sarah said, her voice hesitant. "It doesn't matter," Jason said, walking up to the door. "Maybe there's a phone. Or gas. Anything." Trevor snorted. "If that thing even has gas, I'll eat my shoe." Jason ignored him and pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing into the silent night. The inside of the gas station was just as worn down as the outside. The shelves were empty, dust covering every surface, and the air smelled of mildew and something faintly metallic. There was no sign of life. "Hello?" Jason called out, but his voice only bounced back at him in the emptiness. Sarah stepped inside, hugging herself tighter. "I don't like this place." Lily wandered over to the counter where a small bell sat, untouched for who knows how long. She rang it, the sharp ding cutting through the silence like a gunshot. Nothing happened. Well, that was pointless, Trevor said, glancing around with a frown. I don't think anyone's been here in decades. Jason moved behind the counter and spotted an old rotary phone mounted on the wall. He lifted the receiver, pressing it to his ear. His heart sank. Dead, he muttered, slamming it back down. Lily turned away from the counter, scanning the dim room. What now? We can't just stay here. Jason wiped a hand across his face, his mind spinning with options. We keep walking. If this place is here, maybe there's a town not far from. A loud thud echoed from the back of the gas station, cutting him off mid-sentence. Everyone froze. Sarah's eyes widened. What was that? Jason held up a hand, motioning for everyone to stay still. His eyes flicked to the door behind the counter, where the noise had come from. The door was slightly ajar, revealing only darkness beyond. Trevor took a step back, shaking his head. No way. We are not going back there. I don't care what that was. Jason swallowed, forcing himself to stay calm. It could be. I don't know. Maybe someone's back there. And maybe it's whatever that thing was we saw on the road. Trevor's voice was rising, his panic palpable now. Why are we even still here? This place is creepy as hell. Jason didn't respond. His eyes were glued to the door, the darkness beyond it pulling him in. Something about it felt wrong. But he couldn't shake the feeling that they needed to know what was back there. Maybe it was someone. Maybe they weren't alone out here after all. Stay here, Jason said quietly, stepping around the counter toward the door. Jason, wait. Sarah reached out, but Jason was already moving, his hand gripping the doorknob. With a deep breath, he pulled the door open. The smell hit him first, rotting, decaying, like something had been dead for a long time. His stomach churned, but he pushed forward, stepping into the dark hallway. The dim light from the gas station barely reached him here, but he could make out the faint outline of something at the far end of the hall. A figure. It stood motionless, its back to him, hunched over as if it were bent under some invisible weight. Hello. Jason called, his voice barely a whisper. The figure didn't move. Jason took a hesitant step forward, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Are you, okay? No response. He took another step, the stench growing stronger with each inch closer. And then, slowly, the figure began to turn. Jason froze as the figure's head rotated toward him. The face was grotesque, twisted and rotting, its eyes sunken deep into its skull. The thing's lips pulled back into a gruesome smile, revealing teeth that were blackened and sharp. It wasn't human. Jason stumbled backward, his breath catching in his throat. He couldn't move. The figure took a step toward him, its rotting arms outstretched, reaching for him. He turned and bolted down the hallway, his heart racing as the thing let out a low, guttural growl behind him. Run! Jason shouted as he burst through the door, slamming it behind him. What? What happened? Sarah asked, her eyes wide with fear. Jason didn't stop to explain. We need to get out of here. Now. Without another word, they all ran for the door, spilling out into the cold night. Behind them, the flickering light bulb buzzed and sputtered, the gas station disappearing into the darkness as they fled into the night. But the figure wasn't far behind. The cold wind bit at their faces as they ran down the road, their breaths coming out in ragged gasps. The darkness around them seemed to pulse, suffocating them with every step. The flickering light from the gas station faded behind them, swallowed by the night, but the terrifying memory of the figure burned in their minds. Jason glanced over his shoulder, half expecting the creature to be right behind them, its decayed hands reaching out, ready to drag them back into whatever nightmare they'd escaped from. But all he saw was the empty road stretching behind them, endless and unforgiving. "I don't understand," Sarah panted beside him, her voice strained from fear and exhaustion. "What was that thing? How is this even possible?" "None of this makes sense," Jason said, barely able to keep his voice steady. "We just need to keep moving. We have to get off this road." Lily stumbled slightly, catching herself before falling. "We've been walking for hours, Jason. How much farther can we go? We don't even know where we're going." Jason's eyes darted ahead, searching desperately for anything, any sign of civilization, any break in the oppressive blackness that surrounded them. But the road stretched on, a ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the void. Behind them, Trevor stopped suddenly, doubling over and panting heavily. I can't. I can't run anymore." He leaned against his knees, his chest heaving. "This is insane. What the hell is happening to us?" Jason stopped, glancing back at his friend. He knew Trevor wasn't wrong, there was only so far they could go before exhaustion and fear would take over completely. But stopping felt like giving up, like surrendering to whatever evil lurked in the shadows of this cursed road. "We can't stop," Jason said, walking back toward Trevor and grabbing his arm. "Come on, man. We have to keep going." Trevor looked up at him, eyes wide with panic. "Going where? There's nowhere to go. You saw that thing back there, Jason. This place isn't normal. None of this is normal." Jason opened his mouth to respond, but something in the distance caught his eye. He froze, staring at a faint light flickering far down the road, just on the horizon. "Look," he said, pointing toward the glow. "There's something up ahead." Sarah squinted, her breath still labored. "Is that another building?" "I don't care what it is," Jason said, pulling Trevor to his feet. "We need to keep moving. Maybe this time it's a real town, or a house. Anything." Lily shook her head slowly. "Jason, what if it's not? What if it's more of them?" Jason hesitated, his mind racing. She had a point, the gas station had been a dead end, and whatever they had encountered there was far from human. But they couldn't stay on the road. They couldn't keep running without knowing where they were going. "We don't have a choice," Jason said finally. "We can't stay out here all night. If we do, we're dead." Without waiting for a response, Jason started walking toward the distant light. Sarah and Trevor followed, though their hesitation was clear in every step. Lily lingered behind for a moment, her eyes darting nervously between the dark road and the flickering light in the distance, before she finally hurried to catch up. The closer they got to the light, the more the tension in the air seemed to thicken. The wind had died down completely, leaving the road unnaturally quiet. Their footsteps echoed eerily, the sound swallowed by the night around them. Finally, the light came into view. It was an old, weathered house, its once white paint now peeling and cracked. The windows were dark, the glass streaked with dirt and grime. A single lantern hung on the porch, flickering weakly in the cold wind, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. "I don't like this," Sarah muttered, her voice barely audible. Jason approached the house cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. There was no sign of life, no cars, no sounds, nothing but the lantern swaying gently in the breeze. "We should just keep walking," Lily whispered, her eyes fixed on the house. "This place feels wrong." Jason turned back to her, frowning. "We can't just keep walking forever. We need to rest. And maybe, just maybe, there's something inside that can help us. Food, water, a phone. Anything." Trevor nodded, though his face was pale. "Yeah. Anything's better than staying out here in the middle of nowhere." Jason approached the front door slowly, every instinct telling him to turn back. But he couldn't stop now. Not when they were so close to something. He reached for the doorknob and turned it. The door creaked open with a slow, mournful groan, revealing the darkness inside. "Hello?" Jason called into the void. No answer. He stepped inside, his hand instinctively reaching for his phone's flashlight. The narrow beam cut through the thick darkness, illuminating dusty furniture, broken picture frames, and a thick layer of grime covering everything. The air was thick with the stench of mold and something worse, something metallic and rotting, like the smell in the gas station. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Sarah asked from the doorway, her voice trembling. Jason didn't respond. He moved deeper into the house, his flashlight sweeping across the walls. The place looked as if it had been abandoned for years. The wallpaper was peeling, and the floor creaked under every step. But something felt off. Jason paused, his light falling on a door at the end of the hallway. It was slightly ajar, just like the one at the gas station. His stomach clenched. He knew what was behind that door. He didn't want to see it. But something pulled him toward it, a force he couldn't resist. He reached the door and pushed it open. A single candle flickered in the center of the room, casting an eerie glow on the walls. In the corner, something moved. Jason's heart stopped. It was the figure from the gas station, its grotesque, rotting form crouched in the corner, staring at him with sunken eyes. Its lips curled into a sickening grin, revealing blackened teeth. Jason stumbled backward, his breath coming in short, panicked bursts. The thing stood up slowly, its bones creaking as it moved. "Jason?" Sarah called from behind him, her voice distant. But Jason couldn't move. His legs were frozen, his mind racing with terror. The figure took a step toward him, its eyes locked on his. And then it spoke. "You're already dead." Jason's heart hammered in his chest, the creature's rasping voice echoing in his mind, "You're already dead." The words seemed to crawl under his skin, cold and final, seeping into the very marrow of his bones. He stumbled back, the world around him spinning. His legs felt weak, as though they might give out at any moment. He had to get out of there. He had to run. "Jason?" Sarah's voice pierced through the fog of terror that clouded his mind, but it felt distant, unreal. The figure took another step forward, its skeletal hand reaching out toward him. The candlelight flickered, casting its shadow across the walls like a monstrous, warped reflection. Jason didn't wait any longer. He turned and bolted for the door, nearly crashing into Sarah and Trevor, who stood frozen in the hallway. "We need to get out of here. Now." His voice was frantic, his words tumbling out in a rush. "What's wrong? What did you see?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with fear. "No time. Just run." Jason grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the front door. Lily was already backing away, her eyes fixed on the darkness behind them. "I knew this place wasn't right. We shouldn't have come here." Without another word, they all ran out of the house, the cold night air hitting their faces like a slap. But Jason didn't stop to breathe. He kept running, desperate to put as much distance between them and the house as possible. The others followed, their footsteps echoing down the road. The wind had picked up again, howling through the empty night like a warning. But no matter how fast they ran, it felt like the darkness was closing in on them, swallowing them whole. After what felt like an eternity, they slowed down, their lungs burning and their legs weak from exhaustion. Jason came to a stop, leaning over, his hands on his knees as he tried to catch his breath. "Did you see it?" Trevor wheezed, collapsing onto the side of the road. "Was it the same thing?" Jason nodded, his throat too dry to speak. He didn't need to explain. The fear in his eyes said it all. Lily was pacing, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "This road, it's not normal. I don't care what anyone says. We've been walking for hours, and it's like we're trapped in some kind of loop. Nothing feels right." Sarah shook her head. "But that can't be possible. There has to be an end to this road somewhere." There's no way out. Jason's voice was hollow as he repeated the words from the sign they had seen earlier. Trevor looked up at him, his face pale and drawn. You think this road is cursed or something? I don't know what it is, Jason said, his voice shaking. But that thing in the house, the one we saw at the gas station, it's following us. Sarah stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. You're saying it's the same creature? Jason nodded slowly. It said we're already dead. A cold silence fell over the group. That's ridiculous, Trevor muttered, his voice unconvincing even to himself. We're not dead. We're just lost. That's all. We'll find a way out of this. But none of them believed that anymore. The road, the figure, the signs, it all pointed to something far worse than being lost. This was something supernatural. Something inescapable. We can't just sit here, Lily said, breaking the silence. If we don't keep moving, that thing is going to find us. Jason nodded, though his mind was racing with a grim realization. If the road was some kind of trap, if they really were caught in a loop, then no matter how far they ran, they would always end up back where they started. Still, he had to try. They couldn't give up. We'll keep going, Jason said finally, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at him. There has to be something up ahead. A town, a way off this road. Something. With no better option, they set off again, sticking close together as they walked deeper into the night. The cold wind cut through their clothes, and the darkness seemed to grow thicker with every step, like it was alive, pressing in on them from all sides. The minutes stretched into hours, and soon their surroundings began to blur together. The road felt endless, the same desolate stretch of asphalt repeating over and over. Jason glanced at his watch, but the time didn't make sense. It felt like hours had passed, but the hands barely moved. Does anyone else feel like we've been here before? Sarah asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Jason didn't respond. He didn't need to. He could feel it too, that eerie sense of déjà vu, as though they had been walking in circles. And then, in the distance, a familiar glow appeared. Jason's stomach dropped. No, he whispered, his heart sinking. No, no, no. The others followed his gaze, and their faces went pale. It was the gas station. The same dilapidated building, the same flickering light hanging from the post outside. We're back, Trevor said, his voice cracking with fear. How is this possible? We walked for hours. This can't be happening, Sarah whispered, shaking her head. We left this place. How are we back here? Jason's hands trembled as he stared at the gas station. It was as if the road itself had led them back, trapping them in an endless loop of terror. And then, from the shadows near the building, something moved. The figure stepped into the light, its rotting, twisted form hunched and grotesque. Its eyes, hollow and black, locked onto them. It grinned, that same sickening, decayed smile that sent shivers down Jason's spine. It raised one hand, slowly beckoning them forward. Jason felt a cold dread settle over him, deeper than anything he had ever felt before. There's no escape, he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible. The figure took a step forward, its movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring their fear. Jason turned to the others, his voice filled with desperation. We have to go. Now. But deep down, he knew there was no way out. The road was a trap, a nightmare with no end. And the figure was always waiting, just behind them, just ahead. It was only a matter of time before it caught up to them. The gas station loomed in the distance like a specter from their worst nightmares, its flickering light casting long, jagged shadows across the cracked pavement. The figure stood motionless in the glow, its eyes, empty and endless, tracking their every move. Jason's mind raced. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He didn't know how, but the road had brought them back here, trapped them in some kind of nightmarish loop, where time and distance had no meaning. And now, it was closing in on them. "There's no point in running," Lily whispered, her voice hollow with dread. "It's everywhere we go." Jason gritted his teeth, his mind rebelling against the hopelessness clawing at him. "We can't just stand here and wait to die." "But where do we go?" Trevor asked, his voice cracking with fear. "Every time we try to escape, we end up right back here." Jason turned in a slow circle, staring down the endless black stretch of road. He could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on him, cold and inescapable. There was no escape from the road. It was as though they were caught in a never-ending nightmare, where each step only brought them closer to the inevitable. "We can't run from it," Sarah said softly, her voice trembling. "Whatever this is, it won't let us go." Jason clenched his fists, frustration and fear boiling over. His every instinct screamed at him to keep moving, to keep fighting, but the truth was undeniable, the road led nowhere. There was only darkness, and the thing waiting in it. The figure took another step toward them, slow and deliberate, the soft sound of its decayed footsteps barely audible over the wind. It was savoring their fear, drawing out the final moments of this twisted game. "There has to be a way out," Jason muttered, though even he didn't believe it anymore. His mind spun, desperate for any solution, any escape, but there was nothing left. The road had taken them too far. Lily's voice broke through his thoughts. "Maybe we're dead already." Jason froze. Her words hung in the air, heavy and final. "What if this is it?" Lily continued, her eyes wide and glassy. "What if this road is where people go when they're already gone? What if we've been dead this whole time, and we're just waiting for it to catch up to us?" A chilling silence fell over the group. Sarah hugged herself tightly, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Trevor stood perfectly still, his face ashen. Jason shook his head, refusing to accept it. "No. We're not dead. We can't be." But even as he said the words, the truth gnawed at him. The signs had been there all along. The road that led nowhere. The impossible darkness. The creature, stalking them, its rotten grin growing wider with each step. Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke. "Maybe that's why we can't escape. Maybe that's why the road keeps bringing us back." Jason's heart sank. He didn't want to believe it, but deep down, he knew. He knew they had been walking this road for far too long. Running, searching, trying to find a way out of a place that had no end. The figure was closer now, its skeletal hand reaching out toward them. "We can't let it take us," Jason said, his voice hoarse with desperation. "We have to fight." "Fight what?" Trevor said, his voice cracking with despair. "You can't fight death." Jason opened his mouth to argue, but the words died on his lips. Trevor was right. This wasn't something they could outrun or outfight. It was inevitable. The figure took another step, its hollow eyes gleaming with twisted glee. "There has to be a way," Jason whispered, but the hope in his voice was fading. Sarah's face was pale, her hands trembling as she clutched her arms. Maybe we just need to accept it. Maybe that's the only way to get out of here." Jason stared at her, his heart pounding in his chest. Accept it? How could they just accept that they were already dead? How could they give up? But what if Sarah was right? What if the only way off the road was to stop running? He glanced at the others, Trevor, Lily, Sarah, and saw the same fear mirrored in their eyes. They were exhausted, broken, their minds unraveling under the weight of the truth. They couldn't keep going. Not like this. Jason swallowed hard, his throat dry. "What if we stop running?" Lily's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" "What if we face it?" Jason said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if we stop trying to escape and just face it?" Trevor stared at him, his face pale and gaunt. "Are you saying we let it take us?" I don't know, Jason said, his mind racing. But running isn't working. Maybe this whole time, we've been trying to escape something we can't outrun. Sarah's voice trembled. And if we stop? Jason didn't have an answer. But he knew they couldn't keep running. The road would always lead them back to the same place. The same terror. With a deep breath, Jason made his decision. He turned to face the figure, his heart pounding in his chest. We stop running, he said, his voice firm. We face it. The others hesitated, fear etched into their faces. But one by one, they turned, standing beside Jason, their backs to the road, their eyes locked on the figure. The creature stopped in its tracks, as if sensing the shift in their resolve. Its hollow eyes gleamed, its twisted grin widening as it took one final step toward them. For a long moment, the world stood still. The wind died down, the darkness seemed to close in around them, and the figure loomed just inches away. Jason's breath caught in his throat. And then, with a low, guttural whisper, the figure leaned in close, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves. You're already dead. The darkness rushed in, swallowing them whole and the cold light of dawn, the road lay empty and silent, stretching endlessly into the horizon. There was no sign of Jason, Sarah, Lily, or Trevor. The gas station stood silent and dark, its flickering light long since burned out. And in the distance, the figure watched. Waiting. Because the road never ends. And those who walk it, never leave.